Speaking of Vince McMahon, the 9 Lives of Vince McMahon documentary has aired on Vice. Apparently, this is a documentary that they've had in the can for quite a while, and it was pretty good. It was not unlike a Dark Side of the Ring episode, just longer. It even had, some of the reenactment type things. I think they actually used them from the Dark Side of the Ring, though, so I don't think they did them for this particular show, but you could tell it was in the same vein as those. I don't know if the same producers were involved with this Vince McMahon doc or not. It was an unauthorized doc as far as I can tell. It did not have, they started right from the beginning that Vince had declined to participate. They had all kinds of people on this documentary. If you haven't seen it, Meltzer and Brian Alvarez were a part of it. Lots of different wrestlers from the past that had different opinions on things, and it was a pretty fair documentary, I would say. It was a bit more on the scandalous side, or a lot more on the scandalous side. The 9 Lives of Vince McMahon was kind of referring to, how he seems to have this ability to keep getting himself out of trouble. And the common theme was kind of pointed out in the show, that the common theme here is just Vince just feels like he can buy his way out of everything. They started off telling the story about little Vinny, who grew up in the trailer park as a troubled kid. They got into some molestation allegations that Vince hinted to or talked about, I think, in his Playboy interview. And then they kind of quickly jumped into him trying to get into the WWF under his dad, and his dad keeps turning him away till finally he gives him a shot as an announcer. And it just kind of goes through his whole story, but it hits the highlights of the big moments, like, joining WWF under his dad, taking it over from his dad, buying out the territories. We've heard that whole story a million times, told every which way. I felt like this one was a little bit more in-depth on the story between him and his dad, though. It was, kind of key. This was the first time I had heard really that more detail. I guess I had heard before that people tried to, when Vince started buying up all the territories, the territory owners started trying to convince Vince Sr. to talk some sense into Junior. Like, come on, man, what are you doing? And they kind of went into more detail about that, about the sit down, where apparently Vince Sr. was like, bro, you can't be doing that shit. And Vince Jr. was just like, well, I'm going to fucking do it anyway. And you work for me now, bitch. So you're either going to come along with me or you're not, but I'm going to do it. And it was not it was a little, I'm paraphrasing, but it wasn't much different than that. It was very much a Vince. You can see Vince, even his own dad. Well, you work for me now, technically, and I'm going to go ahead and do this, and you can be with me or you can be against me, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then, they went into the big gamble of WrestleMania, and all that stuff was really fascinating, because even though I've heard it before, they did kind of have either new details or just approached it in a different way. But then they just got right into his scandals, starting, they covered all of them, dude. They covered Jimmy. I didn't count, but there was probably 9 scandals. That might have been why they called it the 9 Lives, other than but they covered Jimmy Snuka. They covered the steroid trial. They covered Black Tuesday, when he tried to, go on TBS back in the 80s. They covered WCW, and they covered the rape allegations from Rita Chatterton, the referee chick. And it was just, they went really in depth on all his scandals. And the common theme was Vince really kind of feels he can buy his way out of shit. Any kind of trouble that he got himself into, throw a little money at it and it goes away. Well, that works. And he's got a real goddamn good lawyer too. That Jerry McDivitt guy, he's good at throwing money at problems and making them go away. And, the show covers all the way up into his current scandal and his leave from WWE. And it was very cool documentary, very much worth a watch. I wouldn't say any of it's groundbreaking or, even at the way it's produced, it looks very Dark Side of the Ring-ish, even if it wasn't by Jason and Evan or those guys. It could have just been a different crew on Vice, using some of the same footage from Dark Side of the Ring and just using the same kind of vibe. Wrestling must do good for them. They keep digging into this. I hope this documentary does good for them because I'd like to see more on this kind of stuff. They even talked about Linda, which is something that wasn't really ever addressed by many people. They talk about how it was pretty common knowledge that Linda and Vince separated somewhere around 2012, people inside the industry, but people didn't really know much about it outside the industry. So they're talking about how it kind of looks bad, like Vince is cheating on her and stuff, when in actuality he is single and ready to mingle. Ha ha. Vince is such a fucking character. Even as a kid, they talk about how much trouble he got into and stuff like that, getting in fights, stealing cars, like just a fucking rebel right from the very beginning. Vince always the badass. They talked about a lot of his failed business ventures prior to WWE and even during WWE. It was, like I said, it's a little dark, but there's a lot of good information in there, a lot of fascinating takes, a lot of interesting perspectives, and the whole thing's definitely worth a watch if you're into that kind of shit. And if you haven't seen it already, I give it very high reviews. And that mixed with all the new shit with Vince McMahon, it's going to be interesting to see what his legacy is going to be. I think there's a movie in the works for Vince as well. And I'm just, the man had quite the downfall. I would not expect to see him back in WWE anytime soon. And he may just end up bankrupt and in financial ruin with all these lawsuits that my guess are going to continue to come. They're just going to continue to come. Russo was on the show too, Vince Russo. It's very interesting hearing his hot takes on everything that was going on, but encourage you to check it out for yourself. On to the next.
Let me tell you something, brother. You can check out full episodes each and every Sunday right here on this channel, dude. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to take your vitamins and say your prayers, brother.